Good morning to everybody. My name is Corrado Paina, and I'm the Executive Director of the Italian Chamber of Commerce of Ontario, Canada. We like to call it ECO Canada. Today, we are here for the third webinars, a series that we have started with the support of Royal Bank, and I'm very happy about the issue that we're going to discuss today: real estate, housing, and commercial market. In the previous sessions, we met an incredible economist, David Richardson, speaking to us about the overview of the economy in Ontario and in Canada. And then we had the Minister of Immigration, the Federal Minister, Marco Mendicino, speaking about the innovation, the new rules of immigration. Today, we're going to talk about this issue. The famous writer Camus, who wrote extensively about pandemic, said that there are three main phases. The phases of skepticism, people don't believe it. Then there is the phase of fear, pure fear. I think we are in the third phase that the writer defines as planning. We are planning our future. And this is a city with an incredible, healthy housing market. And obviously we want to know what is going to happen. This pandemic, sooner or later, is going to end. And I think we have the right people today to tell us how's the future. And we don't have, obviously, wizards. We have people, experts, that have been examining very, very carefully the market. And they will tell us how they see the future of this market. I would like to introduce today the person always behind the Royal Bank. We work together. We've been working for a long time. Rina Pilliteri, Vice President, Regional Vice President of Royal Bank. And Rina is, I don't use anymore so many words to introduce you because I think everybody knows you. You are really a dynamo in your organization as well as in the community. It's always nice to see you. Please, Rina. The screen is yours.
Well, good morning. It is always a pleasure to see you and to participate with the Italian Chamber of Commerce of Ontario, Canada. It is a pleasure for RBC Royal Bank, being the largest bank in Canada, to partner and continue to provide these great opportunities where we can share our insights with the community at large, and not only locally, but globally. So I'm going to start off by introducing a few of my colleagues that are joining me today. Our guest speaker is going to be Robert Hogue. He's our Senior Economist at RBC. Robert is a member of the Macroeconomic and Regional Analysis Group with RBC Economics Research, and he's responsible for providing analysis and forecasts for the Canadian housing market and for the provincial economies. His publications include Housing, Trends and Affordability, Provincial Outlook, and a Provincial Budget Commentaries. In his functions, he's frequently called to comment on the economy, both internally within RBC and externally with our clients and with the media. Robert joined RBC in May 2008 after spending 15 years with another financial institution and as a senior economist specializing in the industry analysis. At the outset of his career, he spent 4 years as an economist with Ontario Hydro, where he specialized in industrial and macroeconomic analysis. And Robert holds a master's degree in economics from the Queen's University and a bachelor's degree from Université de Montréal. And in addition to Robert, as part of our Q&A session that we'll have later in the session, we'll have an online conversation that'll feature expert panelists from RBC, Sandro Giannini, who's our Manager of Business Markets, Rod Hunt, our Managing Director of Real Estate Lending, Paul Felico, our Regional Director of Commercial Mortgages, Stella Partapillo, our Regional Vice President for Mortgage Specialists, and Chris Triotis, our Manager of Mortgage Specialists. So having said that, we look forward to a great session, and we'll kick it off with an RBC video, and then we'll get Robert to start his presentation.
Buying a home is a big decision. It's an exciting time, but the whole process can also seem complicated. There's a lot to consider, like what you could actually afford. Find out now with the RBC True House Affordability Tool. In just a few easy steps, it'll calculate the mortgage amount you could expect to qualify for based on your income, down payment, and credit rating. Your results are ready right away. And the best part? Using the app doesn't affect your credit score in any way. Plus, you'll be assigned a dedicated mortgage specialist who can help guide you through any next steps. So stop guessing and start knowing with the RBC True House Affordability Tool.
Buongiorno, everyone. I'm thrilled to be speaking to you today. Obviously, the housing topic is usually a fairly popular one for obvious reasons, but particularly now because we're at a very, I would argue, very strange time. Strange time because of a pandemic, of course, but also given that we're in a pandemic, the housing market is unbelievably strong right now. So I'm going to spend the next few minutes to go over the housing story, to put it in context and to make it understand, one, why the market is so strong now, but also where we think the market is going over the coming year. Because when you look back, it's been one heck of a roller coaster over the past 12 months, and now we're getting news on a daily basis about how hot the market is, and possibly a little too hot. So let's start my formal presentation here. I've got some nice little visuals to illustrate my talk. And when I say, if we can move to the first slide, please, and you have to bear with me here. I need an assistant to move the slides. Obviously, the big concern up until now has been what the second wave is going to do, and the impact on the economy at large, but especially for the housing market. Now, if we go back very quickly on the first wave, and we saw significant cooling of housing market activity last spring, but that wasn't necessarily because of the recession that accompanied the pandemic. It was mostly everybody adhering to the calls from governments and authorities to stay home and do nothing for a period of time. And indeed, we saw the market almost rounding to a halt last spring, and then things came back very strongly in the summer, which was not entirely unexpected. Obviously, some pent-up demand had built up in the spring, so we expected the moment people would be allowed to operate a bit more normally, would be back in the market, and indeed it was the case. But people came back and with a vengeance, a very strong rebound last summer, and things continued pretty much through the fall. But the concern as we move into the fall was the second wave that was ramping up, what it might do to the overall economy, and the indication that we are getting now is that the economy still managed to muddle through fairly strongly, and this is kind of encouraging. But that being said, it's pretty clear that in the early months of 2021, where we are today, we're likely to see quite a bit of a turbulence, mainly because governments reimpose a fairly strict lockdown measures and various forms of restrictions, not only here in Ontario, but many parts of Canada, and Quebec being one example, where the government went even one step further by imposing a curfew. But the news is encouraging on the pandemic front, and as you're seeing in front of you here, sort of the recent number of new cases, new confirmed cases, and so all those fairly strict measures that were reintroduced in the late stages of December are likely bearing fruits now. We're seeing the health situation improve. It's far too early to start speculating about, when the economy will, or when the government will lift all those restrictions. But I think now we're starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel here. And on top of that, the rollout of vaccines, even though it's been quite chaotic and likely to stay chaotic over the coming weeks, it was, in our view, sort of a game changer. I think the fact that mass vaccination can kick into gear in reasonably short order, really improves the landscape going forward when we look at the period ahead. So if we can move to the next stage, up until I guess yesterday, we saw some fairly significant progress in terms of economic recovery, especially on the labor market. But that being said, this morning, Statistics Canada released the latest number for January, and it was some fairly disappointing news to the extent that the employment fell more than 150,000 in January in Ontario, and then that's more than 200,000 overall in Canada. So it was quite a bit of concentrated in Ontario. The unemployment rate jumped to 10.2% from 9.6% in December. So a little bit of a disappointment, but in our view, this is going to be transitory. I mean, largely reflecting when you look at where the jobs were lost in January, they were mostly in the retail trade sector. I mean, it's no huge surprise here because of the lockdown measures for non-essential businesses, mainly in the retail business, but also accommodation and food. So both of them pretty account for the bulk of the job losses. But the other thing to keep in mind also was that all the job losses were part-time. They were not by and large full-time. So that's something to keep in mind there. So a disappointment in January, but as the health situation continues to improve, and so we can expect that eventually we're going to see some lifting of restriction, and the market, the labor market should improve, and the economy should improve as well. Going forward. So it's just kind of a temporary setback in our view. If we can move to the next slide, and why we're pretty confident that the recovery that started last summer will continue is that, of course, I just mentioned the vaccine is a game changer, but also this has been tremendous support provided by all levels of governments, especially the federal governments. And those are record levels of support. We're talking here hundreds of billions of dollars worth of transfers from governments to households, but also a lot of support for businesses. Now, by no means did the support was perfect. In some cases, it came a little late, but nonetheless, there was tremendous support. The system is in place. Think of CERB through up until the fall, and now the programs that have been put in place since CERB has been wound down. So tremendous support, which register very strongly in terms of economic activity. So in terms of GDP, so that measure of economic activity. So tremendous support, especially on the federal side, but also I would argue at the provincial level as well as at the local municipal level. If we can switch to the next slide. So that was on tremendous support coming from governments, but also tremendous support coming from the central bank. And central bank, the Bank of Canada, has been very active in financial markets to ensure liquidity so that financial markets can continue to operate as normally as possible, and also to ensure that governments can fund themselves at the lowest cost possible. But also the Bank of Canada cut its interest rate, its policy rate, to 0.25%, which in my book is, I round it to zero. So basically the Bank of Canada is putting its foot on the accelerator here, trying to do everything it can to stimulate the the recovery. And of course, when you look at the monetary policies interest rate from the optics of housing, exceptionally low interest rate is a huge driver of activity. So it really helps the housing market to come back. Last spring we reached like a generational high unemployment, and yet exceptionally low interest rates have managed to compensate for that. If I can move to the next slide. And the interesting thing that has happened, which was not only interesting, but very surprising. I mean, if 8 or 9 months ago, someone would have told us that, savings in Canada would surge, we would have been highly skeptical. But here we are today looking back, and it's quite a testament to the massive amount of support that came from government, is that for a lot of households, they managed to build up their saving very significantly. So there's a lot of savings out there, and it's true in Canada, but it's also true across most industrialized countries. So it's reflection of a massive financial support, but also I would argue the lack of ability to spend that money. If you think all the money you would have spent on traveling abroad, for example, maybe traveling to Italy, for example, that's money that has not been spent, and in many cases has been saved. And in some other cases, some households managed to improve their balance sheet by paying debt at the same time. So we've seen some improvement on that front. So tremendous amount of savings out there, which is in hindsight, if we were a few months ago, it would have been surprising, but now I think in hindsight sort of makes sense given the degree of support that we've received. If we can move to the next slide. So that's one very unusual aspect of this particular recession. The other aspect has been how uneven the COVID-19 recession has been, and the recovery in the COVID recession. It's been uneven on many fronts. I mean, you look at on a regional basis, some parts of Canada have been more affected than others. From an industrial perspective, it's been most of the weakness has been concentrated in the hospitality sector. Think of restaurants, think of hotels, think of airline transportation, for example. So very highly concentrated in certain sectors, but also concentrators on a level of income that households were in the job market, I mean, and by level of income. It's been largely folks at the lower end of the income scale that have been hit the most by the COVID-19 recession, whereas folks at the higher end of the income scale have been less affected initially, and by now, especially those at the very high end, now the employment is back even well above pre-COVID levels. So I'm mentioning that because in the context of the housing market, those at the lower end of the income scale are not your home buyers. There are typically either young people still living at home or renters. And indeed, when you look at the impact on housing at large from the pandemic, the most negatively affected has been the rental market, especially in the core areas, like core downtown areas of the GTA. But that's also true of other large cities in Canada. It was also true in Montreal, for example, also true in Vancouver, where the rental market vacancy rates have increased substantially. We saw, some would argue at last, a little bit of a break on rent as well. It's great when you're a renter, not quite so when you're a landlord. But from an ownership perspective, because those at the higher end of the income scale who are your most likely buyers, have not been quite affected. It meant those are benefiting from exceptionally low interest rate their jobs they continue to have jobs. In some cases, people are even work more because of the pandemic, earning even more. Plus, the huge savings have been built up. I mean, all those factors, plus the fact that with a lot of people working from home, a lot of people have reconsidered their housing needs and discovered that they need to make a change. So all of this, basically tidy it all up, you end up with a very strong demand for housing. And if we can move to the next slide, not only very strong demand for housing, but up to record levels. And so the market, the bottom line really is the market is on fire. Very strong demand, and in fact, we could have even more transaction if there were more supply out there. When you look at, if you talk to anyone in the market these days, especially for single-family homes, for example, everyone will tell you there's just not enough units for sale right now, and there's a lot more demand. Obviously, and there's also very interesting dynamics at play. People, largely because of working from home, people are migrating from sort of the downtown core towards the suburbs and even further out towards the smaller markets. So if we can move to the next slide, what we see is that not only is activity very strong in, say, downtown or the core GT in the GT area, but even beyond that, we're seeing the home resale activity, so the existing home activity being shooting through the roof here. Some areas are beating records month after month. So very, very strong. The heat is not just a GTA kind of story. It's pretty much all of Ontario, and I would argue many parts of Canada as well. If you can move to the next slide. Because of that very strong demand, what this has done was it's just depleted inventories. So the number of homes for sale has plummeted, and that's not just an Ontario story, although Ontario is probably one of where the situation is most acute, but many other parts of Canada, and I think that's the story also in Quebec, and increasingly also in BC and in parts of Atlantic Canada as well. So again, there is a very, very low supply. There's a dearth of supply right now. And explaining why people are moving towards, in part, towards smaller markets to get to find that supply, which is getting scarce there as well. If you can move to the next slide. A measure of market tightness. So the demand, when you look at demand versus supply, one very useful metric is the sales to new listings ratio. And I'll spare you all the details and everything, but really the bottom line is when you look at the upper sort of line that you see on the chart here, everything above that is considered a seller's market. And the further above you move to that line, the tighter the market is and the more of a seller's market. By seller's market, it means that sellers really can dictate whatever price they want in the market. And as you can see, Ontario is up there. This is as of December. The odds are that in January, that line probably move even further up. So the market is really driven. The markets, the sellers have really very strong hand right now, which puts a tremendous upward pressure on prices as we speak. If we can move to the next slide. And indeed, when you look at in aggregate, for when you add it all up, all kinds of all housing types included, we've seen price continuing to increase. And in fact, when you look back, COVID and even through the first waves of the pandemic, prices did not, skip the beat here. Prices have continued to accelerate. Now prices are up in the double digits. And if you were to split that between single detached homes, for example, and condos, we're seeing single detached homes rising much faster and increasingly fast as well. Whereas on the condo side, particularly because the downtown condo market has cooled quite significantly through the summer and fall, up until the late stages of fall. The prices are more kind of sideways, and there's even kind of some signs that in some of the downtown locations, we've seen some price declines, in some cases a little bit material, probably less over the last couple months, but it was certainly the case earlier in the fall. So overall, we're into double digits, and you have to expect the prices will continue because of the tightness in the market. You got to expect that prices will continue to accelerate, at least in the near term. If we can move to the next slide. And that's the case, again, not just core GTA, this is throughout the province. And in fact, I was having a conversation yesterday with one of our clients, a home builder in the Kitchener-Waterloo area, and they were telling us that things are absolutely crazy there as well. Prices are just escalating. And so it's something that's fairly broadly based here, and we're seeing that as well in other parts of the country. I'm thinking Quebec and Montreal, and things are picking up as well in Vancouver. So very broadly based here. If we can move to the next slide. Now, when we look forward, I mean, there's a number of factors that remain a question mark, and one is immigration. As I'm sure you know, immigration pretty much fell off a cliff in 2020 for obvious reasons. We closed the border, and for a period of time, I think the Canada federal government was severely constrained about receiving new immigration applications. And yet so far, this huge drop in immigration has done nothing to stop the housing market. But that being said, if it stays this way for a long period of time, we do expect that this will eventually have implication. Maybe I should rephrase that. It hasn't done much to the ownership market, but it did have a negative impact on the rental market. By and large, new immigrants, a majority of immigrants, when they move the first few years into the country, they tend to rent. Eventually, they start to own a home and buy. Usually, I think the crossover point is around 10 to 15 years after living in Canada. The ownership rate is comparable to the other Canadians. But the first few years, typically, the new immigrants tend to rent. So the impact has been mainly there, but for the ownership market, this drop in immigration has not been a restraint or any kind of a major obstacle. But going forward, I think this is something we want to continue to monitor very closely. Obviously, from an overall housing stock perspective, housing stock or home construction really depends ultimately on the degree to which the population increases. And in Canada, for the past more than a decade, the main driver of population growth has been immigration. And actually, I should say in migration, not just immigrants as in permanent resident, but also, especially over the last 3 years prior to the pandemic, on the non-permanent resident side. And by non-permanent resident, I mean largely students and temporary foreign workers. Well, we've seen a huge increase in those that had driven population, contributed to very strong population growth in Canada. So that's something to really monitor going forward. If we can move to the next slide. And for especially for an urban area like the Toronto kind of region, international immigrants tend to go there. You see here, what I'm showing here is the top 10 areas in Canada where immigrants went to in 2020, and no surprise there, it's a large, the vast majority of them go to Toronto, and then Montreal is a distant second. But also there's quite a few that go to Kitchener, the Kitchener, Waterloo area, Ottawa, and also the Hamilton area. So something to keep track of. If we can move to the next slide. But there's also internal flows of population. That's like intra-provincial. There's the Toronto area gets a lot of people from outside of Canada, from outside of the province, but also loses on a net basis a lot of people to other parts of the province. And those regions that benefit from that kind of internal inflow or movements is largely in the Kitchener-Waterloo and Barrie areas that have gained a lot, and Hamilton as well. As well as Ottawa and the Muskokas and the London area. So you're seeing it, and a big part of that story there is one of affordability, because when you look at who's moving, they tend to be younger families. Typically those in their 20s, before they get married, they move to the big city. They go to downtown Toronto. They live in a condo apartment. But once they get married and want to start a family, this is where housing affordability issue gets very severe for them. So they tend to look for affordable, larger living space to accommodate a family. And many of them opt to move out of the GTA region and move to other regions of the province. And this is to the benefit of those the regions that are highlighted on that chart here. So movements of population, even pre-COVID, but especially through COVID, is something to be very mindful of. There's some very interesting dynamics there. If we can move to, I think this is more or less the last chart that I have. Yeah, but also to bring it a couple comments on commercial real estate. Those obviously the pandemic has been a huge shock, especially in the downtown, for the downtown area with the offices. I think one of my colleagues found some statistics, and offices are running at about 5%. Capacity. Downtown Toronto's offices are running about 5% of occupation, I should say, of capacity. So the vast majority of downtown workers or office workers are working from home. In Canada overall, I believe StatsCan said in December there was more than 4.5 million people working from home, including more than 2.5 million people who are currently working from home, who usually do not work from home. So that's definitely very significant. But also what it means is that it's shifting consumption, the location of consumption quite significantly. So less consumption takes place downtown, more if you think of retails, for example, when you would be able to, we were able to visit stores, for example. A lot more of that consumption took place in the suburbs and the other parts of Ontario. And also, obviously, a lot more online relative to before. And so it does raise some question about this commercial real estate space being used and how it will recover in the period ahead. And as much as I would like to give you some very clear insights, I mean, at this stage, it's very up in the air. I think to me, it's clear that once we get the green light to go back to the office, probably a majority will go back to the office, and we're going to see some, and probably with some adjustment in office layouts to accommodate still some concerns about the pandemic. But I would think that the hybrid mode, there's going to be a lot of organizations that would operate on a hybrid mode with people working from the office just on a part-time basis and the rest of the time from home. And I would also suspect that for many organizations working for many workers, working from home will become a permanent work arrangement. And in that sense, this movement towards other parts of the province is probably going to. There's a little bit more to this. So all this to say that from a commercial real estate perspective, obviously the office business will have to adjust. It's probably going to take some time to I guess adjust to a new normal, whatever it is in the future. But also from a retail perspective, I think there's going to be online is going to be something to that there was a trend pre-COVID that really accelerated through the pandemic. So for all retailers to adjust to have an online presence, but also locationally, we might continue to see proportionally relative to pre-COVID levels more taking place in suburbs and smaller areas as opposed to downtown. So it's to me still early to tell where the chips are going to land over the medium to longer term. But I think there's a permanent element that will be there for some time. So enough of me. I know I've taken probably a lot more than was allotted, and I think I'm going to return it to Corrado.
Robert, thank you. I'm going to ask you a question before, and then I'm going to start to read the question to the panel. I thought it was very, very interesting. The message that I infer, and I think everybody's inferring, is there are some strong antibodies, and these antibodies cannot be forgotten, right? The interest rate, the immigration will grow again. We're going to have massive waves of people coming here, in particular to Toronto. Already the number confirmed that Toronto gets practically 40% of the people that come to Canada. On top of that, the unemployment seems under control. And, I would say that we have, and also very interesting factor, the private debt seems that there's savings. The country like Italy has a huge, as you know, public debt, but always a strong private saving, and I think this is a very important key in the future. The questions, unfortunately, are a little bit gloomy because people have some fears, right? And so we will repeat perhaps some concepts that you have been touching quite exhaustively, but it's interesting to see and to hear the panel then what we'll have to say. The first question that I have here is, most of the companies are thinking of returning to the workplace after COVID-19. You touched this issue, while many others are thinking to permanently work from home. Could this mean that Toronto will be a ghost town in the near future?
Yeah, I know some fear that. I personally do not. I think that right now it is a ghost town to a certain extent, largely because of social distancing measures. When you think of the downtown, what the attraction to live there, other than just working there, is the cultural life, the ability to socialize. And right now, this is on offside, right? And the moment is going to be that we get the green light, I think downtowns are going to start to be exciting again, and you're going to see people coming back. People are going to spend more time as offices are going to reopen. Eventually, we're going to see more people working and going to restaurants a lot at lunchtime. So I'm not writing off the downtown area. It will require some adjustments for some businesses for still a period of time. But ultimately, I still see that the downtown is going to get exciting again down the road over the medium term.
Thank you, Robert. I would address now the same question, a little bit more, and more questions to the panel, so we can all participate now. And I think the answer that you gave us is very, very important. And this will apply for the city and the country, or will apply only for Toronto, for instance?
If you're asking me, I would say
to everybody, and to you, always, to everybody.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I'll leave my other panel members to tackle this one since I've talked quite a bit so far.
So you guys, if someone wants to answer to this question, is Canada affected, or will Toronto still a leading city? Is Toronto leading the actual recovery? The country will follow?
So if you want, I could chime in on that. I mean, you're certainly seeing sort of the same dynamics in sort of the big cities across Canada. So, you know, if you want to think in the 6 largest cities in Canada, Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton, and Ottawa, you know, over the last 10 years, that's where 85% of the employment and the population growth have been. And, you know, so you're still, and, you know, obviously things are weaker in Alberta, Calgary, and Edmonton because of the issues with the oil market. But, you know, in terms of the dynamics that we talked about, you're seeing the similar dynamics. I mean, obviously, maybe not to the same extent as Toronto because it's a lot bigger, but you are seeing those. And, you know, I'll pick out one example is Ottawa. Ottawa's housing market has actually been stronger than Toronto's, and Ottawa traditionally didn't get anywhere near as many immigrants, but in the last few years, you've been seeing a pickup in the number of new immigrants that are going to Ottawa and an acceleration of the population growth, and, you know, things are stronger. So, you know, really, housing and all forms of commercial real estate are really driven by population growth and employment growth. And, you know, obviously in these 6 major centers, that's where you're seeing primarily all of the population and employment growth in Canada. And as long as that continues, then you're going to see, you know, strong dynamics in both housing and in, you know, the various commercial real estate asset classes.
Great. Does anybody else want to chip in, or we can go to the second question? I have actually a lot of questions here without arriving. Okay, all sectors are dramatically affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, causing an unprecedented global crisis affecting all of us. Why and how do you think it is possible that the construction and real estate industries continue to grow amid a global pandemic without any fluctuation in the price? How real is the risk of a housing bubble in Canada? And another question that is associated is other people are asking, what is going to happen to the market? We know for a fact that the rent will lower. What is going to be the effect of this lowering of the rents?
Maybe I could just talk about the different commercial asset classes, because, you know, one of the things people should realize too is that Canada probably went into this pandemic in terms of its commercial real estate in the best shape that it's ever been in. And that's like in terms of growth in rental rates, in terms of vacancies, it's been very strong. Toronto, as an example, industrial real estate was at an all-time low in terms of vacancy. Office vacancy was Toronto and Vancouver were leading North America in terms of office vacancy. So, you know, aside from sort of, once again, in Calgary and Edmonton, office, which, you know, everyone knows because the oil has been very weak going into the COVID crisis and still is. I mean, most asset classes were in really strong shape going into it. And then, you know, we should all realize that, you know, as in most things in life, there's winners and losers. So as much as online, you know, means, you know, changes in retail, one of the other pieces of online is a tremendous need for industrial space. So for every $1 billion of online sales, you need 1 million square feet or 1.2 million square feet of industrial space. So what you have in the major cities across Canada is you have an incredibly strong industrial market. And, you know, if we're talking about Toronto, Toronto is either the second or the third largest industrial market in North America. Chicago's number 1 and Toronto and LA are number 2. And you're seeing incredible demand for new warehousing and distribution space, which is being led by as everyone knows, Amazon, and it's very difficult for people in this industry to find space. So it continues to do well and is actually doing better now than it was pre-COVID. Apartments, you're still seeing some increase in, vacancy, but, aside from some issues, and I think some other people have questions about the issues of, being a condo in the core, but aside from the core in the cities, apartments are performing, very well. And it's traditionally the strongest asset class in Canada. And it's one where there's an awful lot of people who want to be in this asset class, a lot of institutional people. Office, as Robert talked on, that's like a, the unknown. Now, one thing that supports office is most of the leases are long-term, so it plays out over a longer period of time. So, you're still, even if only 5% of the people are in the building, you're still, for the most part, have extremely high rent collection. I would say that various surveys of workers would put the people who want to work from home 100% of the time is actually a fairly small percentage of the population. Most people are sort of in that hybrid model where they still want to work in these offices, somewhere about either anywhere from 40 to 75% of the time. And so a lot of people in the industry would say that the increased space per person because of social distancing will offset the demand. And so you're going to see that the future demand for office space in the major cities to be somewhat neutral. And then in retail, once again, you have to split retail into the different types of retail. The parts that are really having difficulties are more fashion retail, and where you're seeing that in the big malls and where rent collection has been poor. And, and Robert talked about this as well, but in, suburban retail, which is mostly grocery anchored retail, what I'll say more necessity retailing, you're seeing that very strong occupancies and very strong rent collections out there. So, really you have to go back and look, but I think it's what's happened is coming in extremely well. For the most part, that's insulating, what's happening to the various landlords. And as I say, as most things, there's winners and losers, even in the different asset classes. So, that just gives an overview of what's happening, on the, commercial side of things.
Thank you, Rod. Thank you very much. Many questions here. Your presentation noted a substantial increase in savings created in latter 2020. I assume this is a concern by the government. What do you think the reaction or plan will be to address this issue? Lower interest rates have certainly not deterred the increase in savings. Who wants to answer to this question?
Yeah, well, maybe quickly, I don't think it's a concern from governments. I think if anything, it tells them that their response has hit the mark. When you look at also the number of people like delinquencies, for example, or personal bankruptcies, it's been extremely low, surprisingly low. Probably is not going to stay that way, but nonetheless, so it's just a sign of the the massive amount of support that's been out there, and I would argue they would probably see it positively in the sense that it probably these are the seeds of stronger recovery down the road. Chances are people are going to keep some high levels of savings for a period of time as for precautionary savings, just in case, because you're still not confident enough that the economy is over the hump. But as over time, confidence is going to come back, and these are people will start drawing down that savings, and it's going to fuel the economy, and hopefully people are going to spend it here. Maybe they're going to go spend it in Italy for a period of time on travel. But it works both ways too, right? Because savings has increased in the US and Europe as well. So once the tourism is going to be open, we're likely to see quite a bit of that being deployed.
Stella, were you trying to talk? Thank you, Rob.
Yeah, I was actually just going to jump in on Rod's comments about what's fueling the market right now. And you mentioned the low interest rates. From an individual purchaser, the residential market is fueled really now by a very low interest rate. Clients can afford more than they could before. And there's no indication that we know of now that those interest rates are coming down. And so as long as the interest rates stay as low as they are, as long as clients have savings to put into homes, we fully expect the home market to stay pretty hot.
Thank you, Stella. We're talking about here travel restriction. I would like to know how much travel restriction will have negative impact on real estate specific to Airbnb. Demand for real estate and also so many small businesses closure affect on the industry. I'm reading the question, I apologize. Does anyone want to answer regarding travel restriction?
Well, obviously, maybe very quickly on Airbnb. I mean, it's not surprising. I mean, it's not just Airbnb. It's the whole kind of travel industry that or hospitality sector that's been affected. But the thing is, in Toronto, in the city of Toronto, on top of that, there's been some new regulation that have kicked in September, I believe, after being delayed for a couple of years, that really attempts to clamp down on the short-term rental being run as a business. So it's kind of a bit of a double whammy for that particular activity in the city of Toronto.
Okay, and goes to another question. Are there no help, support, tax breaks for Canadian citizens who reside abroad and who like to invest in the Canadian real estate market?
The market does not need subsidies right now.
I guess, you know, this is probably a person from Italy that is asking this question.
But actually, yes. If I may, if anything, I would expect a tightening of rules, because the market is getting so hot. If you're thinking of housing regulation at large, don't expect some programs from the government to encourage people to buy a home. It'll be the opposite. It'll be various policy measures to try to cool the market instead. So my short answer is no, don't expect that.
For your information, Rob, we have people from Italy that are following us, and that's why.
Oh, hello. Buongiorno.
Yeah. Another question.
Buonasera.
Yes. Due to the current situation, more and more families are struggling with unemployment and money, I guess, lack of money. However, despite concerns about the economy, the majority of Canadians continue to believe in the strength of the housing market. Could you please tell us a bit more about RBC programs in support of this category? Canadians, could you tell us a bit also more about the resources Canadians should leverage to help them find a home that's right for them and their budget?
I can tackle that question on quickly.
Yes.
So some of the resources RBC has is access to our many specialists, such as a mortgage specialist, financial planner, and investment retirement planner. We also have tools that can help you understand quickly how much you can afford to purchase a home. So if you log on to our rbc.com website, you can click on banking link, and on the left-hand side, you'll see explore mortgage options. So the RBC tool that helps clients quickly understand how much they can afford, it's called the True House Affordability Tool. So if you click on Get Started, this tool will take you through a series of questions. So for example, how much is your household income? How much is your household debt, including loans, lines of credits, credit card debt? This tool will help you quickly understand how much you can afford. We also can connect you with RBC specialists, for example, a mortgage specialist, to complete a full pre-approval and assist clients to better understand the qualifications for a mortgage. We assist first-time home buyers, high net worth clients to utilize equity in their homes. perhaps to assist in a down payment to purchase an investment property or investment properties. So at RBC, we also look for the opportunity to review your mortgage if you have it at another financial institution to see how we could save you money, perhaps on our programs, perhaps on our interest rates, you know, whatever the case may be. So other specialists we have that you can utilize is such as a financial planner or an investment retirement planner. So these planners will do a full review of the client's savings for a down payment, a review of the client's investment statements, and or strategy for the clients to invest and increase the overall net worth. So with all three specialists that RBC gives you access to, they will actually help support the client's financial needs and financial goals. So we definitely offer clients a wealth of knowledge and programs and services to assist anybody looking to purchase in the real estate market or to assist in saving to buy later on in the real estate market, or if they're looking to help their family, children, perhaps looking to get into the market, we're able to kind of assist in all those parts.
I'd like to give a chance to everybody to speak. We're getting close to the end of the session. Clearly, as you said, the residential market in the GTA is hot today. For how long will this continue, and what dark clouds do you see forming? I guess everybody's asking this question. We try always to answer to this question, but the question is still, please convince us that, you know, the situation will get better and we will return to normality.
Yeah, well, I think yes. The housing markets still will remain hot for a period of time through probably most of this year. We may see, and in fact, we do expect that activity is going to slow down, from month to month. If you look at the trend, probably we are at the peak or somewhere around there. But the level of activity, I mean, we are at record level right now. So the level of activity is going to remain high through the year. And this will continue to put upward pressure on prices. I just don't see prices decline. Even like the downtown condo business, I think probably most of the weakness is behind us. And by later stages of this year, we might see prices start to pick up again on that front.
We have other questions, as we do every time. We will answer to them. We will send them to you, and you will have a chance to reply to us, and we will send them to our members and clients and so on. But I would like to ask to everybody to give us a final message, if you don't mind, 1 minute each. I would like to hear everybody's voice and hear really your definitive, ultimate message. Can we start with Rod? Sorry, I didn't want to force you to speak, but I'm sure, please. Oh, actually, Paul, please. Paul, will you speak? Will you say something?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Thank you, Corrado. I think your message at the start of the Q&A period was extremely well said, in that we have antibodies in place, right? The environment here is set up for continued success.
I think we lost him. Yes. Sandro, you want to take over?
Sure. So in the small business, I'm the manager of small businesses. Very interesting, some notes there. Yeah, they're highly impacted right now. There's a lot of government support from rent, wages, and the loans to finance capitals. But I believe things will settle down. The businesses will align. The consumer who votes with their wallet will decide which businesses we need tomorrow, what we will buy, where we will go eat, what we need. We will come out of this. We have not seen a lot of bankruptcies yet. I think it was commented already. But some sectors, there are a lot of closures, the restaurant, hospitality, nail salons, that's what we're starting to see affected. But we're seeing a lot of the service providers, transportation, they're doing extremely well. So I think ultimately the consumer, you and I, will help redefine what the small business market looks like tomorrow. Thank you, Corrado.
Thank you, Sandro. Rod, would you feel like saying something?
Sure. The one thing I would say, because there's a lot of questions about the future and where are prices going, I think the biggest piece that's going to underpin not only the housing market, but all forms of commercial real estate is population growth. And the federal government has come out and they're committed to extremely high levels of immigration, over 400,000 new immigrants a year for the next 3 years, and which is up from what we had pre-COVID. So, really, if people are watching any barometer to see where the future of these markets are going, if you're watching the immigration levels and what's happening, and Robert talked about this, also the, resumption of the foreign students coming into Toronto, which will, I think, absorb some of the, rental condos, which I know we didn't get to a number of questions on that as well, and that will help. So I would say personally that, I am bullish on commercial real estate in Canada because of the outlook for the country and the outlook on immigration, population, creating demand.
Stella?
I'm just going to close by thanking everybody for joining. It's wonderful to be partnering with this group. My 2 pieces of advice: get good advice before you make any decisions for your household. It's super important. Lots of great advisors out there. Aren't partial to ours, but there are lots, and please do get good advice. These are big decisions we're making. The second, I believe the best thing we can do for our economy is to take care of ourselves, to take care of our communities. So stay healthy, stay safe. We cannot purchase anything. We cannot fuel the economy if we're not well. So please take care of yourselves.
Thank you, Stella. Chris?
Perfect. Thank you, Carl. I mean, I'll just piggyback off what Stella said. Please, get some great advice. At RBC, we offer, as I mentioned previously, we have lots of resources, lots of specialists that can walk you through the purchases, refinances, utilizing your equity in your home. So please don't hesitate. In some cases, clients do get a little cautious and try and do the work themselves. We are specialists in this field. So please utilize us at any time. We will be more than happy to assist.
Rina, you want to say something, or we love to hear your voice?
Thank you, Corrado, and thank you to everyone, my RBC colleagues who have shared some great information today. I really appreciate the time that everyone has taken. Stay well, stay strong, and we look forward to our next session.
Okay, thank you, Rina. I want to thank Robert Hogue. Great presentation. Thank you very much to all of you. We're going to have another session, if I'm not wrong, soon, and we will inform you about the issue will be discussed. I really want to close saying, we know that the economics are strictly associated to a psychological condition. And I think that the vaccine, once it will be distributed, will help to enhance our strong sense of reaction. We want to fight, we want to go out, we want to go to dinner, to restaurants, we want to go to movies. And I think that all of that will definitely bring back the spirit of this country and of this city. I want to thank you, all of you. And if we will get more questions, please feel free to send us. We will readdress them to you. Thank you again for this really continuous support from the bank, from Royal Bank. Thank you to everybody. Bye-bye.